This story takes place a long time ago, when I wasn't even thinking of being a pirate yet. 'Twas the time when Mumble Seraphine had to leave her house in the bayou for a pilgrimage, and I set off on my own to make myself a living and explore the world. After a couple days walking through the mud of the swamp, one late afternoon I reached a more solid ground in the outskirts of the bayou, and no more than 100 steps away there was a great house, a mansion really, protected by a thick cluster of tall trees. I was starving and hungry, and that sight was more than welcome. Maybe they'd let me have a cut and a piece of bread, and if not, I could always steal a chicken in their face. But when I got there, here's the strange thing. The tall, wrought iron main gate of a mansion wasn't sealed, and it just needed a little push of me to open. Despite how vast the gardens and the house looked, nobody was around, and the whole place clearly hadn't been groomed in a while. I knocked on the door, and nobody answered, so I pushed it open and found myself in a completely abandoned house. A thick layer of dust on the furniture, and an assortment of items discarded hither and thither, despite the place itself looking still livable, with even a few logs ready to be burned still in the parlor's fireplace. And, hello? Anybody's home? Yelled a couple times. Told me when I was alone in there. That was just perfect, I decided. I could stop there a couple days to rest my poor feet, and maybe there was still something eatable in the kitchen. And who knew, maybe the owners left something valuable still around. I set down my bundle and rubbed my hands, ready to poke my nose around. A more accurate exploration of the kitchen left me disappointed, for everything in there was rotten or unpalatable anyway. The search for trinkets was more fruitful at least, and I filled my bundle good. Now as I searched every room with growing curiosity, I started to get an idea of how the previous owner must have been like. A great studio, cornered between the dining room and the parlor, was full of books about architecture and history of the most various cultures, some of them still laying around on tables and mantelpieces. I began thumbing through a couple of them, and found a journal of the owner himself. James Blackwood was the name. The entries weren't older than 20 years. He had been indeed an architect, and that particular log told about an experience he had while building something, I think it was a bridge, in the deep of South Africa. Reading, I discovered not only that the man had had a great passion for collecting curious objects of the African cultures, but also that during this specific permanence he wrote about, he came across a mysterious tribe of natives that seemed to watch over the construction. They really didn't do anything more but standing there looking, not blinking an eye, but soon their presence became almost unbearable for the builders, like they were being circled by vultures. He described them as misshapen and hideous, hard to look upon. Blackwood did creep into their village once, and what he wrote about his experience there gave me bloody chills. He had witnessed some kind of strange ritual in which the Dalmar, that's the name of a tribe, sat in circle chanting a low, booming litany as one of them stood in the middle, swaying and shaking in some kind of ecstasy, eyes rolling back in his head. Then, two other natives carried out of a hut a huge mask, which only look made Blackwood terribly uneasy for some reason. The man in the middle of the circle stopped shaking and walked to the mask, kneeling before it in adoration, as the others stopped chanting and stood. Then, they all just piled up on the poor maid and started eating him alive, ripping whole limbs and hunks of flesh of him. What horrified Blackwood, and me for that matter the most though, was that the victim didn't even try and fight back. On the contrary, he was so still and so silent as his striped companions slaughtered him. The Blackwood could hear her flesh tearing and the very bones popping out of her sockets. But in all this, the mask was what struck him the most, having some strange magnetic effect on him that he just couldn't understand. You see, this reading left me very shaken. I was considering to find a different shelter for the night, but it was already dusk outside and I knew better than venturing out in the dark without knowing that part of land. I went on exploring, and in the end, I found where Blackwood kept the trinkets from his journeys through Africa. On the first floor, there was a small gallery right before what must have been the Blackwood's bedroom, where every sort of masks, vases, spears, and drapes were still neatly shown in their cases and on the walls. A wooden bust of a woman wore a necklace made out of a lion claw, and a great case with carved elephant tusks sat bulkily in a corner, rather out of place for some reason I couldn't put my finger on. Worn out and seeing that night was starting to descend on the trip of the trees outside, I crashed on the bed in a small blue room next to the gallery, probably the guest room, and drifted asleep in minutes. I was woken up later that night by a distinct noise, like someone banging a hammer in the next room. For a minute I could just lay there, frozen in fear. I wasn't alone. As quiet as it could be, I grabbed the knife from my bundle and silently tiptoed out of my room, pricking my ears to pinpoint the source of the noise. It came from the gallery. With cold sweat and a heart banging almost as loud as that hammer, I held up the knife with a shaking hand and opened the door of the gallery. Nobody was there. But the great case with the elephant tusks had been moved away from a corner, and I could see that it had been used to hide a door that was now nailed shut. A hammer was laying on the floor. I reached for it, and everything faded to black as I heard a guttural voice whispering my name. I woke up in the blue room I fell asleep in. I looked at the knife in my hand, wondering if I unconsciously grabbed it during my strange dream. Then my attention was captured by a new noise, like scratches. After making sure that it wasn't another dream by pinching my own arm, I stood and patted around the room, finding out that the scratches were coming from the earth. On the spot I imagined it was just rats, and that those same noises caused me that strange dream. I considered going out to investigate more, but at that time of the night, and especially after such a creepy dream, the idea wasn't really appealing, so I just went back to bed.